The following is brought to you by Vertical Vet. Rethink your GPO.
Hello, Vertical Vet family. I am Dr. Ernie Ward, Chief Veterinary Officer, and it is my highest honor to introduce you once again to one of our business academies. And these are the webinars, the online content, the videos that we create to help you on the business side of veterinary practice. Of course, we have our Vet Med School that we talk about some of the medical topics and so forth, and we have our panel discussion. So we've got something for everybody. But this week, this episode, it's particularly special because it's a topic that's near and dear to my heart. It's something I've written and lectured on exhaustively for the past 25 or more years, and that is about empowering our staff, leveraging our staff, allowing staff to expand their roles and responsibilities. I mean, I got to tell you, I'm super excited to introduce you to our guest today because it's going to be a fun conversation. So we are joined today by Brittany Yost. She is a CVPM from Ohio. She also went to this little school called The Ohio State University, which we will not hold that against her. Go Dogs. But she graduated from there and earned a business degree. And she went immediately, it sounds like, to go and work at her father's very successful clinic, Mann Veterinary Clinic up in Galena, I think it is, Ohio. I'm misremembering that, but I've met her father over the years, and he's lovely. She is a certified veterinary practice manager, and she does a lot of work with industry. So she's beginning to consult and help others because, again, she is doing some phenomenal things there at Mann Veterinary Clinic. So again, Brittany, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, yeah, thank you for having me. I'm excited to talk about this topic.
Well, Brittany, it is an important topic because I think we're living in a time when we face workplace shortages. It's harder than ever to find great, capable, talented people. But on the other side of that, it's even harder to retain them because they're being enticed by signing bonuses and all kind of crazy options and incentives out there. So I think that culturally, we really want to say, okay, how do we give people what they really want, which is responsibility and recognition, right? Reward for their work. And so I think empowering our employees is a really timely conversation, right?
I agree.
So if before we get started with some of the topics I want to cover with you today, like when I say, or when you say empowering our employees, tell us what you mean.
Empowering our employees, I think it's twofold. One is kind of developing leaders in all levels of the organization. So leaders in the middle, leaders at the top, leaders in different areas, in the back of the hospital, front of the hospital, front office, and also making sure that we know why our staff is in this industry. What are they passionate about? What areas are they interested in? Do we have a technician that's in appointments that's passionate about dentistry, or do we have a front office person that's interested in more responsibility? Things like that. So just making sure that the clinic is using its staff to its fullest capacity, and also that all of our employees feel fulfilled and like they're in this industry doing what they want to do.
Yeah, and I love that. Two really important things I want to just remind everybody of. Number one, when we talk about empowering people, I agree 100%, Brittany. It is aligning those core principles and values, your sense of purpose, with the work that we're doing. So the workplace has to be in sync with your own vision of what you're trying to accomplish with your life, and how that syncs up with vet medicine. Of course, that makes you a success. The other part of this too is efficiency, and I'm glad you brought that up, Brittany, because a lot of times when people talk about empowering, we kind of start to go into what many veterinary professionals consider the woo-woo side of things. And I've been accused of that more than once. But, there's like, oh yeah, that's all the touchy-feely stuff. But I'm really also trying to improve appointment workflows within the vet, practice, right? I mean, so I think that you can't say empowerment without saying, we're also being productive.
I completely agree. Yeah, if you are, relying on top leadership to make all the decisions, you are really putting a dent in your efficiency. I feel like if you have the people that are closest to the work that's being done, making more of the everyday decisions, it really does increase your efficiency. Am I the one that should be deciding how, we're refilling scripts? Like, what's the order? I'm not refilling the scripts every day. I really think it's the people that are in the trenches that should be making that decision. And my responsibility is more just to offer a template and manage what our expectations are.
Oh, I love that. You're speaking my language. I like it. And you're right. I mean, again, it's that empowerment to me also means that local autonomy and authority to execute whenever possible. And like you mentioned, like refilling prescriptions, you need to have processes in place that allow people to make those decisions, yes or no, right or wrong, whatever it is. So the first thing, the biggest barrier that I see to this, and look, we used to call it staff leverage. And there's a lot of terminology that's been, thrown about over the past 30 years in my tenure. But, I think the biggest obstacle to this entire concept is one of giving up something. So I think that a lot of times leaders, practice owners feel like, well, if I empower people and give them autonomy and authority to make decisions, I'm giving up power. So there's some ego issues there, I think, but I won't get into that today. But I want to kind of get your opinion on this other concept. Where I settled in my career was I used to use a terminology called train people to trust people. And so I think that where people fail in this concept is they don't ever give up the power because they've been burned. They've tried this and they said, well, I told those receptionists they could refill prescriptions if they were, and then they mess up and they're like, well, never again, right? So explain a little bit about why I would say train to trust and why you would say it's okay to give up power to anybody in the clinic, So, I mean, you're an owner, a manager, or whatever. Why is it okay to give up power?
I think it's really hard for us to give up power, but I think the first step in successfully empowering our employees is requires us to give up some of our power. And I think, like you said, a lot of times we hold on to it so tight because we've been burned, or we feel like we like that feeling of being needed. I guess if I'm the one that knows how to fix A, B, and C, and I teach someone else to do it, then why am I here? What's my purpose? So I think that that's um, a big barrier for a lot of us. And uh, if you Sorry, I was just thinking of an example. We had network issues several years ago where a lot of our computers were going offline, and I knew how to fix them. And I really didn't want to bother anyone else with how to fix them. But I created a bad situation in that because when
Right.
one went down, it was all on me to fix
Right.
it. So I think if we give up some of that control and allow others to help, it really does make us more efficient.
Oh, I love that. And again, if there's too much concentration of power, in this case, it was a specific skill set, right, to fix the network or whatever. When that person goes, it's like we used to say, you've got to practice diva or devo if they can't go on vacation without everything falling apart, right? So that's like
Oh,
by
yeah.
definition, that's where, so the concentration of power. The other thing too, I'd like to get your take on, I used to, back in my day, early, 20 years ago, they used to say, your goal in business and in work should be to make yourself indispensable. And I said, that's the opposite of what you should be. You should be making yourself completely dispensable, especially if you're in a leadership position, right? So what do you say to those people that are like, okay, Ernie and Brittany, I get kind of where you're going, but there's certain things that only one person can do, right? I mean, in your case, the network. Explain where that might lead them astray.
I think, in all honesty, the effectiveness and the success of your leadership is demonstrated more when you're not there than when you are there. So, those people that feel like they can't go on vacation, they may feel needed and like they're important and they're doing their job, but it's actually not a good thing. Just a couple weeks ago, I stopped in on my day off to pick up a personal package that was delivered there, and I was on a time crunch. My daughter had an appointment, so I was in and out. I walked in thinking I wouldn't run into anyone, and I saw a technician, and she was very flustered. And she said, all the credit card machines are down. So the manager and me wanted to stop and fix it, but I knew I had this other obligation. So I told her, I'll text you all the information you need to fix it, and we'll get this up and running, but I do have to go. So every stoplight I hit on the way home, I'm texting her, call this number, here's our merchant ID, et cetera, et cetera. About 20 minutes later, she finally texted me back and said, hey, I just saw your text. Thanks for all the information, but we got it all figured out right after you left. So my initial reaction was, oh, I feel so guilty. I should have been there to fix it. They were busy and stressed out. But then I also realized this is actually a really good thing. I
Right.
set them up for success and they knew how to fix it and they didn't need me. And that's a good thing.
And that was your ego nudging you, right? So this
Right.
is that part of self-awareness, emotional intelligence that we always tell people about. But you shouldn't feel guilty. You shouldn't blame yourself. You shouldn't say, "Well, I should have fixed this," right? And you also shouldn't feel that you're indispensable in these situations as a leader. And again, I really. Whenever I see hoarding of power, of skills, and look, this is a rampant issue within veterinary clinics, within any small business, right? There's always this one person that can only fix that one thing. But when I see the hoarding and concentration of power, it's typically a person that's has ego issues, right? And so they are exerting their influence and power on others through keeping this one thing to themselves. And, that's how they get their self-worth. And guy, if you're a leader and you're watching this, you've got to transcend this behavior. This is self-awareness 101. So as Brittany and I are saying, it's like, okay, check yourself. Number two, as a leader, you should try to make yourself indispensable. You should be able to say, I can go and take my kids to soccer match and the clinic doesn't fall apart. And, Brittany, there's so much inherent stress that veterinary professionals put on themselves. They literally don't go to the soccer, they don't go to the baseball, the dance recitals because they fear what will happen at the clinic, and it breaks my heart. Any comments on that? Because again, I know that one of the things that you said you want to talk about was that no one expects you to do it all, right? I mean, so how does that play into this whole drama that we create for ourselves? We go, I have to do it all. I wish I could go see my daughter's dance recital, but I can't. How do you help?
Yeah, I think it again goes back to just developing leaders at all levels. I have worked in a handful of clinics where it is very top down. The owner or the manager is saying, "This is how it's going to go. I'm going to make all the decisions. Basically, don't ask any questions. This is how we're going to do it." And I think at the end, you're just creating super unhappy employees because nobody likes to just be a lemming and come to work every day and do exactly what they're told. You're also creating really underdeveloped employees. So if they ever do face a crisis and for some reason, the head of the hospital is unavailable, they're really not going to be prepared or equipped to know what to do. So I think, we all need that work-life balance, especially after this nightmare of COVID that we've just come through with more, patients than we've ever seen historically. We do need to learn to step away and we do need to learn that work-life balance. And we really can create that by empowering our employees and giving them the tools and resources to make those decisions when we're not there.
Yeah, I really like what you said there, and I want to repeat it because it's something that I believe in as well. And that is the fact that when you don't empower people, when you don't train them to trust, when you don't give them autonomy and authority to dictate little mini decisions throughout the day, then you underdevelop them. And I think that's really important because a lot of times when I see inefficiencies in veterinary clinics, it literally is as simple as, oh, I'm not supposed to do that. Right? So if you have team members that are like, well, I don't know how to do that, right? And again, we're not talking about like surgery and prescribing medications and that. I mean, we're talking the basic stuff, like running the autoclave. I ran into this issue a couple of days ago with a vet clinic and their packs are not getting done. And it's like, well, who does them? Only these 2 techs did them. And I'm like, really? Why don't you train a couple other people? You got people running around here, So you know what I'm getting at. It's really important if you want to optimize efficiency, increase and improve workflow in your clinic, you've got to empower people. I mean, I love what you said there. Now, there's another thing we want to talk about today too, and that is, and I'm going to slightly spin this, empowerment and delegation are not the same thing. And I think that where people go wrong with this is actually, I'm going to add another term here, abdication. I think that too often people say, okay, if you're going to do this thing, if you're going to be in charge of autoclaving, then it's on you, right? And then that takes out the harmony, the teamwork element. So explain what you mean by, empowerment and delegation, and maybe please throw abdication in there and why these are distinctly different and the impacts they have on your team and workflow.
Yeah, in this industry, I don't think abdication is ever a good idea. I think the more cross training we can do, the more people that know how to do all the different tasks, the better. And I think at the same time, delegation and empowerment are also used interchangeably when, like I said, they're 2 very different things. Delegation is sort of addressing what the clinic needs right now. Those packs need wrapped. I'm going to tell you to go do it. Empowerment, I think, addresses what the practice needs now and in the future, and also what an employee needs now and in the future from their job. Also, as a side note, I think empowerment isn't for every employee. Not every employee should be incredibly empowered to make everyday decisions, and not every employee wants to. And I think that's an important thing for us to remember. Some employees just like to come and do their job, and these are my expectations, and that's it. I don't want to take on any additional stress, and I don't want to take anything home. And I honestly think that's okay. A lot of times, those are the people that are dependable and are just here to do the work. At the same time, if we can spot those employees that are looking to be enriched and are looking to take on additional responsibility and leadership roles, the more the better. And I think if we can show those employees, I value your opinion, I value what you're interested in, and I value what you can bring to the clinic, then we're going to go from having those underdeveloped, unhappy employees to these very capable, strong, energetic employees. And the more energy and strength you have in the organization, the better.
Oh yeah, I love that. And you're right. I mean, we aren't painting with a broad stroke across the entire clinic team. Having said that, it's pretty much most of the team. For me,
Right.
there's a few reserved spots where I can go, okay, just,
Sure.
but by and large, again, Brittany, where we're having the crunch are with the professionals, right? So the vet techs, the licensed veterinarians, those people with the credentials. And I think that where again, what breaks my heart is to see these veterinary technicians in particular, but associate vets are affected as well, where they literally feel handcuffed, right? The management, the owners just don't allow them to execute, and they're sitting there going, I can do this. But I have to go through 3 different decisions before they let me do it. And that's where I think the inefficiencies really start to become paramount. And so, for me, while I agree 100% that it's not for everybody, for most of your team, especially the professional staff, and I'm going to extend this to paraprofessionals such as receptionists, CSRs, because a lot of times they're on the phone and they need to be able to act quickly, right? Get them in or not. I mean, that's like a simple decision algorithm, but they need to be able to say, okay, yes, we can get you that refill or whatever. What are the guidelines for your clinic? Brittany, it's really funny as we're having this conversation. One of the other confusing elements, delegation, empowerment, of course, abdication, which just toss that one out, but you be careful. But I think that, when I'm sitting there looking at where does satisfaction come from? Where does the joy of work come from? It's really from when people are able to determine to a certain extent, within legal boundaries and safety and so forth, but what they do, right? I mean, it's not that they go do a different job, but it's like, they feel like they have some decision-making ability in the day-to-day, and I think you touched on that earlier, and I just want you to expand on it, like where people don't want to be lemmings, right? They just don't want to do the same old thing every day. And I think that's where empowerment becomes so powerful, right? So maybe expand a little bit on how it makes people feel and leads to better job satisfaction when they're empowered.
Yeah, I think when like you said, our professional staff, our licensed staff members in particular, take ownership over an area, they really do feel like they have more of a claim on the clinic and the hospital and the success of the practice itself. We have one technician that has just taken on all of our lab equipment, and it's wonderful. She does all the maintenance. She does all the updates. When something goes wrong, she's the one that calls, and she's incredibly dependable. And she came from a clinic where her hands were a bit tied, so she seems a lot happier here. And also, it also goes back to if we give the employees more power and say in the day-to-day operations, they're the ones that are in the trenches doing the work. So they are better equipped to make decisions. We switched our PIM system in the fall. So we went from one system to another. And we have, obviously, like every practice probably should, we have a very particular way that we refill controlled substances from when the client calls in to when they're coming and picking it up. With this new software, the system that we had in place, it just didn't work. So we needed to develop a completely new process. So rather than, me coming in when I'm not answering the phone or refilling it or giving it to the client when they pick it up, we brought together a really strong front office staff member, and we brought together a really strong technician, and they developed that. So when they have a stake in or a claim in what's going on and in the flow of the practice, they're going to have more buy-in, and their coworkers are also going to have more buy-in. So like I said, it doesn't make sense for us to make those decisions, the people in management or the owners. Talk to the people that are doing it every day, let them develop the system and have a say, and they're, again, going to be more satisfied in their job, and the reasons behind it are going to make more sense.
Amen. Music to my ears. And again, I used to always say, there's 2 things I want to point out. Number one, I used to always tell people the closer a person or team is to the actual work being done, the more authority they need to have in the decisions, right? So it's just what you're saying there. It's like, you got to get the people that are actually doing it to come together and figure out what the process is. The other thing too is, when you look at systems, which ultimately, this is empowerment is part of a system, then I think, you say, okay, what makes sense, right? So what should that receptionist be able to refill or not, right? How the text, I mean, whatever the role is, but you really need to dig down. And this is an ownership and a manager responsibility. Like you can't just say, hey, you guys figure it out on your own. Now they can come up with systems, but ultimately you've got to really do the work. And I would argue, Brittany, even in your situation, you had those people develop a process, but then you as a manager and your owners probably had to say, okay, we're going to do this or not.
Absolutely. I think it goes back to what I talked about earlier, where our role is really to provide a template for what and manage the expectations. So this is what we need to accomplish, ABC. Let's all work out the details together.
And, I don't think, Brittany, I've ever given a lecture anywhere in the world, but I didn't preface it by saying there's no right way, there's no wrong way, there's only your way. And so let's talk about that, because that's important, because, it's just because Brittany does it one way and Dr. Ward does it another doesn't mean that's the only way to do it. So maybe explain why flexibility, and adaptability is really important when it comes to empowering your employees.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when we're looking at which way are we going to do it, we really just have to remember what the ultimate goal is. The ultimate goal is to get this owner the controlled substance that they need for their pet. I know there's so many 80/20 rules in this industry. There's financial 80/20 rules. There's inventory 80/20 rules. I think I read in a book, I honestly can't remember who it was, but there's another 80/20 rule with this is if you have a staff member that can do a task that you need to get off your plate at least 80% as well as you or better, you should let them do it. And I think this is, this kind of touched on my own ego issues where I thought this was the best way to do it. But if you want to be successful, you have to move away from this idealistic mindset to a practicality mindset. You can't be trying to create the ideal. You have to be more of a pragmatist if you want to, again, fulfill your employees and make things more efficient. So your way isn't the only way.
Right. And you touch on something. Perfectionism is really destructive and harmful in a workplace because there's really no perfect way to do anything. I mean, whether it's a medical decision, whether it's client, communication, there's only a gradient, and so I wish that there was this one perfect way. And I know people look to people like me to go, well, tell us how to do it. And it's like, well, it depends. And they hate that answer, but it does. Yeah. It does depend. But, getting back to this perfectionism, and I like that, the fact that you have to be willing to accept that. And again, I'm not talking about killing patients, okay? I'm not talking about running off clients. That's a whole nother discussion. But let's talk about the day-to-day, like, when they autoclave and how they count inventory or whatever, those little things. You also have to give people a little bit of room, a little bit of flexibility to not be perfect all the time. Because that kind of pressure, I think, is very harmful. It sets a standard that is unattainable and it's certainly unsustainable. And, and I think that's one of the limiters to small businesses, Brittany, quite frankly, is because they go, okay, you know what, we're never going to lose anything, anytime. And you know what, when they do lose, they don't know how to handle it. They handle it in a harmful fashion. I don't know, maybe I'm making absolutely no sense to you, but does that resonate at all on any level?
Oh, it absolutely does. And I cannot quote him directly, but I think it was President Roosevelt that said something about how the best leaders not only find the right people to put in place, but they also have the ability to not meddle in the day-to-day decidings of, what's happening. So I think there's a lot of that. You can't just empower employees by finding the good people and putting them in the right place. You also have to step back and give them the freedom to do it, even if that includes failing to an extent. I think also we fail to give the opportunity sometimes. If I was really bad at managing our social media, I found someone that was really good at it, and I had to step back and say, you're good at this. I'm putting you in the position, and now I have to let you try it.
Yeah, and I love that. You do, I used to always say it's a matter of, I used to say about guardrails. I said, so my goal in life was to create guardrails around systems in my clinic so that people didn't crash the car off the cliff. They might ride on the little bit left or right, but, and I might be terrified, but I knew they weren't going to kill everybody in the car. And that's really where I think as leaders, we have to be willing to accept that people are going to drive on the left side of the road, on the right side of the road, or whatever, and go along with it, unless, again, they're crashing cars, but they're not crashing cars for sure.
Right.
Well, the last thing I want to talk about with you today is that the importance of investing in people, because I think that too often, I get this question all the time. I want to grow my clinic, Dr. Ward, what services should I add? And I really always come right back to, well, let's talk about efficiencies, because you can make a lot more money profitably. And again, I'm talking about profit here in particular, by just improving efficiencies. But explain a little bit about what you mean by, hey, investing in people is actually helping your clinic grow. And that leads us right back to empowerment, and efficiency.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I included a lot of people in this industry, doctors and owners and managers are more comfortable with the black and white measurable objectives. So if we want to grow our practices, a lot of times we just focus on increasing production or increasing compliance or maybe creating new revenue streams. Are we going to pick up a new orthopedic procedure? Are we going to start doing laser therapy, things like that? But it really comes down a very effective way to grow our practices is to invest in our people, educating them, for example. So do we need the doctor in every single well care appointment to explain why flea and tick prevention is important? I realize this is a very basic example. If we can just develop our employees and trust them to explain that to the clients themselves, it's making the doctors more efficient. It's making appointments more efficient. It's making everything more efficient. Also, if we are growing our practice, say we are increasing, where our goal is to increase compliance or pick up a new revenue stream, if we don't have a successful developed staff, we're not going to be able to sustain that growth effectively, in my opinion.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. And again, I think too often we go for buy the new gadget, invest in the new thing, and instead of investing in our people. So I totally agree. And a trained staff actually allows you to execute and amplify in ways you aren't even expecting, and so I think that it's interesting you bring up the orthopedic versus laser. Laser is the right answer. And the reason I say that is because you can extend that amongst more people, right? I mean, an orthopedic procedure typically means one doctor trained, highly specialized equipment and so forth, and it's very limited in application. Whereas and I assume you're talking about class 4 laser or cold laser therapy, I can train a lot of people to do that. So I'm a fan of that for sure. So, those are the opportunities I'm always seeking. And I know if I train my staff, we can then do this stuff. Nutritional, I mean, you guys, look, I've given a laundry list for 25, 30 years now, so it's no secret what you can do. Well, Brittany, I got to tell you, this has been a great conversation. Any last bits of wisdom from you on empowering employees that you like to share with the Vertical Vet family before we go?
I think the biggest thing, just speaking to owners and practice managers, is we just really need to get out of our own way. Like I said at the beginning, it's okay to give up power. No one's expecting us to do it all. And once we can accept that and release ourselves of some of the things that are on our plates or on the owner's plates or the doctor's plates, the better off we're going to be, the more efficient we're going to be, and the happier your staff's going to be.
Gosh, it is about happiness. Ultimately, when people are empowered, they enjoy their work more, they're happier. And I got to tell you, happy staff, happy vet. It's
right.
that simple, I know that we apply it to a happy wife, happy life, but I'm telling you, having spent most of my life in vet clinics, I want a happy staff.
True.
Brittany Yost, I got to tell you, what a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much for sharing all of your experiences up there. I mean, you guys at Mann Veterinary Clinic in Ohio just doing amazing things up there. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. This was fun.
All right. Well, listen, Vertical Vet family, that's it for another edition of the Business Academy, all about empowering your employees. And again, I want to thank Brittany Yost, CVPM, for joining us today. Again, a wealth of information. I love her energy and just really, desire to try to help. And again, she comes by it naturally. Her father's a veterinarian, so I'll take a little bit of credit there, but as a fellow veterinarian. But I want to thank Brittany once again. And I want to thank you for watching this and being a part of the Vertical Vet family. Again, we create content like this to help elevate your clinic. And so whether it's dealing with the business challenges that we face on the daily, whether it's dealing with the medical issues that are constantly changing in our world, we want to make sure you're informed and up to date. So again, if you like content like this, definitely make sure to go to the verticalvet.com website and check out all of our archived materials. We've got hundreds of these videos now over the years. We've been doing this now for 4 years, and it's my pleasure to always do it. So on behalf of the entire amazing team at Vertical Vet, I am Dr. Ernie Ward. We will talk to you soon. Bye.